God took the baby because he knew Mallory was not ready. Those were the first words out of my mother-in-law's mouth. She was not whispering them to me in private. She was speaking into a microphone, addressing 300 people at the church charity brunch. Her ambition was a sin, Deidre continued, looking down at me with completely dry eyes. And this loss? It is her penance. A chance to start over the right way. 10 days. That is how long it had been since I lost my son. My body was still cramping. My skin was still pale. And there I was, sitting at table 4, listening to the woman who was supposed to be family tell the entire town that I had killed my own child with my career. The room went dead silent. Forks froze halfway to mouths. I looked at my husband, Trent. I begged him with my eyes to stand up, to stop her, to say something. He did not. He just nodded at his mother solemnly. I did not scream. I stared at the diamond cross resting on Deidre's chest, glittering under the lights. And I realized something that turned my sadness into ice. This was not a prayer. It was a performance. And I was just a prop in her tragedy. The silence in our SUV on the ride home was heavier than the humid air outside. I stared out the window, watching the manicured lawns of Silver Willow pass by, waiting for my husband to say the words. I needed him to say, "She was wrong." I needed him to say, "I am sorry I let her speak to you that way." Instead, Trent cleared his throat and gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. "Mom was just trying to help you process the guilt, Mal," he said, his voice level and reasonable, as if we were discussing a grocery list. "You have been working 60-hour weeks. You have been stressed. Maybe she is right. Maybe this was a biological reset." I felt a physical wave of nausea hit me. A biological reset. That is what they called the death of my son. I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the cool glass. This was not new. This was the dynamic. For 5 years, I had been the designated servant in the kingdom of Deidre. I remembered the Christmas party 2 years ago. It was pouring rain. Deidre had handed me the keys to the guests' cars, because the valet company she hired had cancelled. "You are wearing waterproof mascara, dear," she had said. "The rest of us are in silk." I spent 3 hours parking luxury sedans in the mud, while the real family took portraits by the fireplace inside. I remembered the financial bleed, too. Deidre frequently borrowed my credit card for what she called church emergency supplies. She claimed the church card was maxed out and she needed to buy food for the homeless shelter immediately. I never saw a receipt for food. But I did see a charge for $450 at Serenity Med Spa. When I confronted her, she did not even blink. "I am the face of this ministry, Mallory. Looking tired is a disservice to the Lord. Consider it your tithe." I paid the bill. I always paid the bill. I told myself it was the cost of keeping the peace. I told myself that once we had a baby, things would change. She would respect the mother of her grandchild. We pulled into the driveway of Deidre's estate. She was waiting on the porch, sipping iced tea, looking completely unbothered by the massacre she had just performed at brunch. We got out of the car. I walked slowly, my body still aching. I expected her to perhaps ignore me, or maybe offer a backhanded apology. Instead, she walked down the steps and shoved a heavy clipboard into my chest. "Since you are not occupied with a baby anymore," Deidre said, looking pointedly at my flat stomach, "you have freed up quite a bit of time in your schedule." I looked down at the clipboard. It was a contract for the Silver Willow Country Club. "My 30th anniversary vow renewal is in 3 weeks, she continued. I fired the last planner. She had no vision. "But you? You are organized, and frankly, you need the distraction. Idle hands make the devil's work, Mallory. Get busy." She tapped the clipboard with a manicured fingernail. "It needs to be spectacular. White orchids, crystal drops, a string quartet. Do not disappoint me. God gave you a second chance at being useful today." She turned and walked back into her air-conditioned mansion, leaving me standing in the driveway with the sun beating down on my head, holding the plans for a celebration of love for the woman who had just called me a murderer. I looked at Trent. He shrugged helplessly. "It will be good for you to stay busy," he said. That was the moment the sadness began to curdle. It stopped being grief, and it started becoming something cold and sharp. I looked at the clipboard. I looked at the closed door. "Okay," I whispered. "I will make it spectacular." 3 days later, I was standing in the grand ballroom of the Silver Willow Country Club, surrounded by buckets of white hydrangeas. My back was throbbing. I had been on my feet for 6 hours straight, moving centerpieces because Deidre had changed her mind about the color scheme 3 times since breakfast. I was exhausted. Not the good kind of tired where you feel productive, but the bone-deep exhaustion of grief mixed with adrenaline. The double doors swung open. Deidre marched in, heels clicking against the marble floor like gunfire. Trent trailed behind her, checking his watch, looking like he would rather be undergoing a root canal than spending a Saturday with his wife and mother. Deidre stopped at the first table. She frowned. She reached into the vase, pulled out a single white rose, and held it up to the light like she was inspecting a dirty dish. No, she said. She dropped the rose on the floor and stepped on it. Cheap. Deidre sneered, looking directly at me. It looks cheap. Just like you. I need this to look like old money, Mallory. I need this to look like legacy. Try harder. The insult hit me right in the chest. My eyes burned. The tears were automatic, a reflex I was too tired to control. I looked at Trent, desperate for him to intervene. He sighed. He looked at the crushed flower on the floor. Then at me. Do not start a scene, Mal, he whispered, stepping closer to me but not touching me. Just fix it. She is stressed about the anniversary. Do not start a scene. I looked back at Deidre. She was not looking at the flowers anymore. She was watching me. And for the first time, I saw it. I saw the tiny, tight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She was enjoying this. In that second, the fog of grief lifted just enough for me to see the trap. This is what psychologists call reactive abuse. Deidre was poking me. She was prodding a wounded animal, waiting for it to bite back, just so she could point a finger and say, "Look at the rabid dog. Look how dangerous she is." She wanted me to scream. She wanted me to throw the vase. She wanted me to give her a reason to tell the church ladies that poor Mallory had finally snapped and needed to be institutionalized. If I reacted, she won. If I fought back, I was the villain. I took a breath. I felt something inside me click. It was like a circuit breaker tripping in a storm to save the house from burning down. The heat in my chest vanished. The urge to cry evaporated. A cold, heavy numbness washed over me from my scalp to my toes. It was the most peaceful thing I had felt in 10 days. I wiped my face. My hand was steady. "You are right, Deidre," I said. My voice was flat. It had zero emotion in it. It should be perfect. This is a reflection of you, after all. Deidre blinked. The smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She had braced herself for a fight, not an agreement. "Well," she said, smoothing her jacket. "Good. I am glad you finally understand the standard." "I do," I said, walking toward her. I did not look at Trent. "To make sure it meets your standard, I need full access. I cannot work blindly. I need the master guest list, the itinerary, and the digital files for the slideshow." I held out my hand. "I need to make sure every single detail is exactly what you deserve." Deidre looked at me, searching for the sarcasm, but I gave her nothing, just a blank, obedient stare. She relaxed. She dug into her purse and pulled out a heavy ring of keys and a flash drive. "Finally," she said, dropping them into my palm. "Submission suits you, Mallory." She walked away to critique the catering staff. Trent gave me a quick, relieved nod, happy that I had swallowed my pride so he did not have to be uncomfortable, and followed her. I closed my fist around the keys. They felt heavy, cold. Deidre thought she had broken me. She did not realize that she had just handed the keys to the castle to the one person who knew exactly where the bodies were buried. The night before the vow renewal, Deidre's master bedroom looked like a war zone of silk and chiffon. She was standing in front of a floor-length mirror, struggling with the zipper of her custom-made white gown, screaming at a seamstress who looked ready to faint. I was standing in the corner, holding a stack of programs. I was invisible again, just part of the furniture. "The slideshow!" Deidre suddenly shrieked, spinning around. She grabbed her iPad from the vanity and threw it at me. I barely caught it before it hit the floor. The color balance is terrible on the wedding photos. I look washed out. "Fix it. Now." I looked down at the screen. "It is locked, Deidre." Deidre rolled her eyes, letting out a heavy sigh of annoyance, as if my inability to telepathically know her passcode was a personal failure. "It is the day I became a mother, obviously," she snapped. 0, 4, 1, 2. "And do not you dare look at anything else." She turned back to the mirror to berate the seamstress. I sat down on a velvet ottoman and typed in the code. 0, 4, 1, 2. The device unlocked immediately. I opened the Photos app. I intended to just adjust the brightness on the wedding scans, exactly as she asked. But the moment the app launched, a notification popped up on the screen. iCloud storage. Full. Photos stopped syncing 3 weeks ago. I stared at the message. To edit the slideshow, I needed to free up space. I tapped the Albums tab and scrolled down to the bottom, past the favorites and the hidden folders, until I found the one place people always forget to scrub. Recently deleted. I tapped it. There were 42 items waiting in the digital purgatory. Most were blurry selfies or accidental screenshots. But 2 thumbnails caught my eye. They were dated 3 weeks ago, right around the time I was losing my baby. I tapped the first one. It was a video. I turned the volume down to a whisper and pressed play. The screen filled with steam. Deidre was sitting in a jacuzzi, holding a champagne flute. But she was not with Kenneth, my father-in-law. She was with Pastor Vance. In the video, Vance was laughing, his arm draped around her shoulders. Deidre took a sip and giggled a sound I had never heard her make. "Oh. Stop worrying about the bill," she said in the video, her voice slurring slightly. "The old fool pays for everything. He has not touched me in a decade. But his bank account is very affectionate." My heart hammered against my ribs. Adultery, disrespect, cruelty. It was all there. But it was the second image that turned this from a family scandal into a felony. It was a screenshot. Deidre must have taken it to brag to a friend about the luxury trip. It was a digital invoice from the hotel. I zoomed in, reading the fine print. The Royal Cabo Suite. $5,200. And right there, in the payment methods section, it did not say Kenneth's name. It said, "Billed to St. Jude's Relief Fund. Card ending in 8842. I froze. That was not just a credit card. That was the charity account. The money meant for the homeless shelter, for the food drive, for the desperate people Deidre claimed to serve every Sunday. She was embezzling federal charity funds to pay for sex vacations with the pastor. I did not gasp. I did not look up. I did not let my hands shake. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the USB drive. I plugged it into the adapter. In under 60 seconds, I exported the entire recently deleted folder onto my drive. Then, I did something even better. I selected the two files, the video and the invoice, and I hit recover. They vanished from the trash and reappeared in the main library. I dragged them to the end of the slideshow playlist, right after the photo of Deidre and Kenneth cutting their wedding cake. "Done," I said, standing up. Deidre did not even turn around. "About time," she muttered. "Put it on the charger and get out. I need my beauty sleep." I placed the iPad on the nightstand. "Sleep well, Deidre," I whispered. "You are going to need it." The ballroom of the Silver Willow Country Club looked like the inside of a diamond. I had spent 40 hours ensuring it did. White orchids cascaded from the ceiling in waterfalls of silk and petals. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars drifted overhead, casting a soft, flattering glow on the 300 guests below. The air smelled like money and lilies. I stood in the back, near the technical booth, wearing the all-black uniform of the hired help. I watched the town's elite file in. The mayor, the church elders, the wealthy donors Deidre spent her life courting. They were all there, smiling and shaking hands, completely unaware they were walking into a crime scene. Then, Deidre made her entrance. She floated into the room wearing a custom white lace gown that cost more than my first car. She looked radiant. She looked like a queen. She moved through the crowd, accepting compliments, touching arms, laughing that practiced, tinkling laugh. 30 years of faithfulness, I heard her say to the mayor's wife. It takes work, but God rewards the righteous. I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Trent. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but his eyes were anxious. He did not tell me I looked nice. He did not ask if I was tired. He looked past me, toward the stage. "Make sure the sound is perfect, Mal," he warned, his voice tight. "Mom is really stressed. The microphone was feeding back earlier, and if it screeches during her vows, she is going to lose it." I looked at my husband. Even now, standing in the shadow of his mother's ego, his only concern was her comfort. "It will be unforgettable, Trent," I promised. "The audio will be crystal clear." He nodded, relieved, and walked away to take his seat at the family table, the table where there was no chair for me. I stepped into the tech booth. It was a small, soundproof glass room elevated above the crowd. It was the nerve center of the entire event. From here, I could see everything. The stage, the projector screen, and Deidre, who was now making her way to the podium. I looked at her, glowing in the spotlight. There is a concept I read about once called the theater of virtue. It explains why the most corrupt people often shine the brightest in public. They are not performing for God. They are performing for the audience. Because deep down, they know that if the applause ever stops, the darkness will eat them alive. Deidre was not renewing her vows tonight. She was renewing her disguise. But she forgot one rule of the theater. Never treat the person running the lights like garbage. I closed the heavy door of the booth. I turned the deadbolt. Click. I reached for the control panel and disabled the remote receiver. Now, the clicker in Deidre's hand was just a useless piece of plastic. The only person who could control the screen was me. I put on my noise-canceling headphones. The world went silent. Down on the stage, Deidre tapped the microphone. She smiled that beatific, saintly smile. The trap was set. Deidre stood at the podium, bathed in the warm glow of the spotlight. She looked out at the 300 guests, paused for dramatic effect, and wiped a single, perfectly timed tear from her cheek. 30 years ago, she began, her voice trembling with emotion. I promised to be a faithful servant. To my husband. To my family. And most importantly, to my God. It has not always been easy. There have been trials. But I have walked the narrow path of righteousness every single day. Up in the tech booth, I adjusted my noise-canceling headphones. I looked at her on the monitor, a woman who had called me a murderer, treated me like a servant, and stolen money from the poor to fund her affairs. The narrow path, I whispered. I reached out and pressed the enter key. On the massive projection screen behind Deidre, the slide of her wedding photo flickered and vanished. In its place, a high-definition split screen appeared. On the left side was a blown-up image of a digital invoice. It was sharp and undeniable. The Royal Cabo Suite. Total. $5,200. Highlighted in neon yellow was the payment source. Billed to St. Jude's Relief Fund. Card ending in 8842. On the right side was the video. Deidre was in the jacuzzi, steam rising around her naked shoulders, clinking a champagne flute with Pastor Vance. Then, the audio kicked in. I had maximized the volume. Oh, stop worrying, Vance. Deidre's voice boomed through the ballroom speakers, distorted but unmistakable. Kenneth is such a bore. But his money pays for our fun. He has not touched me in a decade. The reaction in the room was physical. It was as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the Silver Willow Country Club. 300 forks lowered to plates. 300 heads turned from the screen to Deidre, and then to Kenneth. Kenneth stood up slowly. His face was a terrifying shade of purple. Deidre turned around. She saw the screen. She saw herself in the jacuzzi. She saw the invoice. No! She screamed. The microphone caught the shrill panic in her voice. Turn it off! It is a deepfake. She did this. She is crazy. She looked frantically toward the head table, locking eyes with Pastor Vance. Vance! She pleaded. Tell them we were ministering. Vance looked at the screen. Then he looked at the wealthy donors at tables 1, 2, and 3, the men who signed his paychecks. He saw the disgust on their faces. Panic took over. Survival instinct kicked in. Vance grabbed the table microphone and scrambled backward, knocking over his chair. She tempted me, Vance shouted, his voice cracking. I am a victim of this Jezebel. She forced me to use the card. I tried to say no. Deidre's face crumbled. It was not the screen that broke her. It was the betrayal. Her partner in crime had just thrown her to the wolves to save himself. You coward, she shrieked. She lunged toward the tech booth, blind with rage, intending to kill me. But in her haste, she forgot about the dress. Her heel caught on the heavy lace train of her custom gown. She flailed. She tipped forward. Time seemed to slow down. Deidre fell face first into the 6-foot-tall champagne tower I had set up earlier that day. Crash. The sound was deafening. 300 crystal glasses shattered at once. Champagne exploded like a geyser. Deidre landed in a puddle of alcohol, broken glass, and humiliation. She tried to stand, slipping and sliding, her white dress turning translucent and gray with the mess. The room was deadly silent, save for the sound of dripping champagne. Kenneth walked up to the edge of the mess. He looked down at his wife, who was gasping for air on the floor. He did not offer her a hand. He twisted his gold wedding band off his finger and threw it. It bounced off Deidre's wet shoulder and landed in the broken glass. I am done, he said. At the front tables, the donors were not looking at Deidre anymore. They had their phones out. They were not taking pictures. They were dialing 911 to report federal wire fraud before the police came for them too. I sat in the booth and watched. I did not smile. I did not cheer. I just took off my headphones. The show was over. I walked out of the double doors of the Silver Willow Country Club and into the cool night air. Behind me, the chaos was still unfolding. I could hear shouting, the shatter of more glass, and the distant wail of sirens approaching. Trent ran out after me. His tuxedo was disheveled, and his eyes were wild with panic. Mallory! Wait! He shouted, reaching for my arm but stopping short when I turned to face him. What did you do? We can fix this. Just come back inside and tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you hacked the system. He wanted me to take the fall. Even now, with his mother lying in a puddle of embezzled champagne, he wanted me to be the villain so their perfect image could remain intact. From inside the ballroom, a scream echoed. It was Deidre. Trenton, help me up. Do not you dare walk away from your mother. Trent froze. He looked at me standing tall, calm, and finally free. Then he looked back at the open doors, where his mother was commanding him from the floor. Old habits do not just die. They have to be murdered. And Trent was not a killer. He hung his head, turned his back on me, and rushed back inside to wipe the champagne off his mother's ruined dress. I smiled coldly. Goodbye, Trent. I walked to my car, got in, and blocked his number before I even started the engine. The fallout was swift and brutal. I did not need to be there to see it. The court documents told the story better than any gossip columnist could. Because the fraud involved a federal charity and interstate wire transfers, the authorities did not take it lightly. The investigation revealed that Deidre and Pastor Vance had siphoned exactly $142,000 from the St. Jude's Relief Fund over 3 years. They were charged with wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Kenneth filed for divorce the next morning. He provided the district attorney with years of financial records he had previously ignored. He testified against his wife to save his own assets from being seized. 6 months later, the judge sentenced Deidre to 5 years in federal prison. She was ordered to pay full restitution. The church excommunicated her. The country club revoked her membership. The Queen of Silver Willow was now inmate number 8940. Pastor Vance took a plea deal, testifying against Deidre to reduce his sentence to 2 years. Even in their downfall, they betrayed each other. I never visited. I never sent a card. But the past tried to knock on my door one last time. 8 months after the sentencing, I received a voicemail. It was in the blocked messages folder on my phone. It was Trent. His voice sounded thin and exhausted. Mal, please. Mom is not doing well in there. She is older. She is scared. Her lawyer thinks a character letter from you saying she was a good grandmother in spirit could help with an early release appeal. Please. She is still family. She did it all for us. I listened to the message while sitting in my new office. The sun was streaming through the window, illuminating the white orchids on my desk, orchids I bought because I liked them, not because someone ordered me to. She did it all for us. The lie was still there, embedded in his bones. I did not get angry. I did not cry. I simply pressed the delete button. The message vanished. I went back to work. My life today is unrecognizable from the woman who sat crying at that charity brunch. I started my own event planning agency. It is small, but it is mine. I have a circle of friends now, a chosen family who celebrate my ambition instead of calling it a sin. When I tell them no, they respect it. When I speak, they listen. I learned that blood is a biological accident, but loyalty is a deliberate choice. If you are listening to this, and you feel trapped in a dynamic where your pain is dismissed and your reality is denied, I need you to understand 3 things. First, privacy is power. When you are planning your escape, silence is your only friend. Never let the enemy know you are digging until the shovel hits the casket. If I had screamed at Deidre that day in the ballroom, she would have locked me out. My silence bought me the keys. Second, beware the nice trap. Do not confuse nice with good. Deidre was nice. She smiled. She hosted. She prayed. She donated. But she was not good. Goodness requires character. Niceness only requires a script. A person can smile at you while they are destroying your reputation. And finally, receipts are immunity. In a toxic family system, the truth does not matter. They will gaslight you until you question your own sanity. They will rewrite history. The only thing that cuts through the fog is proof. When they call you crazy, show them the invoice. When they call you a liar, play the video. They say the truth will set you free. But I learned that sometimes, the truth needs a projector, a locked door, and the courage to burn the bridge while you are still standing on it. I lost a husband and a family that night. But I gained my life back. And that was a vow worth keeping.